All right, welcome everyone. And before we get started, for those of you in the back, it would be great if you guys can come forward. As you can see, it's a large room. Let's make it more intimate.
Yeah, come on up, because you know what? We've been known to give some things away, and I can guarantee you, if you're sitting in the back of that room, you are not going to be able to find the thing that we're giving away.
And hint, the fifth row might be a good one to sit at.
Wow! Actually, it's great because if you come forward, we're recording this session. There are a lot of people who may have had, well, they may have partied just a little too much last night. They'll watch this online, please do, and then it'll look like, man, this is packed. Scott and George really draw a crowd.
All right, so I think we'll get started. My name is George Kuruvula. I'm a solution strategist with Citrix. I've been with Citrix about 7 years, based out of Chicago, where it's just cold, colder, and coldest. So happy to be here, where it's the other extreme. But as a solution strategist, I work with some of our largest accounts at Citrix, and Scott and I engage in these accounts together a lot of times. So with me, I have Scott Lane, and you should probably talk about why you got that hat on and the beard.
Does anybody know why I've got this hat on? There you go. Does anybody know why I'm sporting a playoff beard? Oh yes, play Gloria, baby. But anyway, yes, Scott Lane. I'm distinguished sales engineer. I actually have a mailing address in the St. Louis area. I'm rarely there. I've been at Citrix 15 years almost now, and before that a customer. So always love to do these things. So
yep.
Thank you for coming. And I'll take the hat off now, George.
Thank you. All right, so the goal of this session is to look at Citrix Workspace from a security perspective. I'm sure all of you, over the last few days have heard a lot about Workspace, Workspace intelligence, the user experience, the productivity aspects. This session's really focused around why it matters from a security angle. So that's really the goal of the session.
And a lot of demos, by the way.
Yes, it's demo heavy, so hopefully you appreciate that. All right, so I think all of you agree, we live in this any world now, right? So we've got users using all sorts of devices, accessing applications that are no longer monolithic. They're spread all across the environment. You've got stuff in public clouds, you've got stuff in a private cloud. Some are SaaS applications. You've got all kinds of issues to deal with, and the same applies to data. And this is quite different from how things used to be back in the day when users came into an office. You had very well-defined perimeter. You gave them a corporate-owned asset. You deployed applications onto that device. Everything was under control. If they had to work remotely, they go with that device as a VPN, well and good. But that just no longer applies. And as a result of this any world, we've got a perimeter that's constantly expanding, right? You've got different types of workers on different types of devices, connecting over various types of networks, accessing applications that are different types, like SaaS and web and mobile and Windows. And on top of that, these applications are delivered from different locations, and the same applies to your content. So it's a major challenge. And this leads us to the next piece, which is, if you look at any customer out there, security is top of mind, right? That's their number one concern. And if you look at IT budgets, that's where most of the money lies, because that's the number one issue that most enterprises deal with. And nobody wants to be on the front page of Wall Street. So that's a big issue. And with Citrix Workspace, that is one of the fundamental challenges that we are trying to solve. So how do we do this? First off, we take a very people-centric approach, right? So in other words, we want the users to be able to use any device that they want. You don't want to confine users. You want to empower users. So from that perspective, you don't want to limit the users in terms of what they can use. So that's piece one. Number two, we provide you an application that's easy to deploy, that the user can enroll by themselves, and then they can just deploy it on their device and access it on their device. And instead of going to multiple points of entry, they have a single place to go to. So they can essentially enter a URL, or you can auto-enroll them, and they get to that Workspace app to access all of these applications and data that they need access to. Now, the next piece to that is, as far as the applications go, they come from all different locations, right? So like, for instance, I could have an enterprise app, and that could be coming from different sources. But from a user perspective, you want to abstract that. So user sees, let's say, Concur or some other application, he doesn't really need to worry about where that's coming from, and you can completely abstract that from them. So that simplifies the user experience regardless of where they're accessing the application from or what device they're going to. And in the back end, we allow IT organizations to essentially deploy these workloads wherever they choose. So depending on the use case or the application, there might be a particular cloud that's suited, or maybe you want to keep stuff on premises. It doesn't matter. We aggregate those resources and make it easy for users to consume them. But most importantly, from a security perspective, now you are essentially reducing your overall attack surface by providing users access to these apps in a single app, but also a single point of entry, right? So that's great, and we provide you end-to-end visibility as well. So all the way from the app that the user is accessing from the device, and then all the way back into the network. So we provide you the full visibility required to essentially apply the policies in a contextual fashion as needed. So what are the three pillars of this vision of ours, right? So the first is simplified control. So regardless of where the application's hosted and where it's being deployed from, you can still apply the policies that you want on those applications for that specific user in a dynamic fashion, and the user just consumes it. So if I'm a user that's accessing an application from a corporate device versus my own personal device, it doesn't matter. The policies are applied in a dynamic fashion. So there's a simplified control aspect. The second piece is the 360 visibility, so giving you end-to-end visibility. From an IT organization perspective, this is extremely critical, especially because of the security concerns that most organizations have. So giving you that end-to-end visibility is a big piece of this. And the last piece is analytics, right? So it's not just about what's happening now, it's understanding trends and behavior and then being able to proactively take action. So that's a big piece of this vision as well. So over the next, like 80 minutes or so, we're going to go through some of the security benefits of Workspace. So we look at each one of these, talk about some of the aspects of each element, and then we'll go into a lot of demos. So let's start off with contextual access, right? So most environments are dealing with unsanctioned applications, SaaS applications, web applications, and if you look at how they tackle these different use cases, you've got different point solutions to address it. And each point solution could be best of breed, but then from a user experience perspective, it's a nightmare, right? And even from an IT complexity perspective, it's a headache. So even if you look at large organizations, they have, in some cases, they probably have 30, 40 different things or points of entry for users to get to. So if a user were to leave that organization and you're trying to troubleshoot something or just trying to log the user down, by the time you actually restrict all of the different accounts and such, the user might be long gone with your intellectual property, right? So that's a major challenge. So the way we solve this is with our access control solution, right? So regardless of the SaaS application or web application, you've got different concerns. You want to protect your intellectual property. You want to protect against malware and ransomware. You want to provide users the best experience in terms of single sign-on. And maybe all of these don't apply to every single use case. So depending on the use case, we make it easy for you to apply the security policies that you want and then give them the best user experience as well. And Scott will be showing this to you in a little bit. So another nice aspect of our solution is Smart Access. How many of you have heard of Smart Access or using Smart Access today? Quite a few. All right. So it's been around for a while. And the fact that we are still talking about it is because it's still very, very relevant, right? So think about the scenario where you've got users using virtual apps and desktops, and then you need to essentially dynamically control what they can access based on the device they're connecting from or the network they're connecting from or based on just their authorization. You're able to do that with Smart Access. And this is where if I have a sanctioned device, I connect in, I go to a URL, enter my credentials, I can access my set of applications and do whatever I need to. But if I go to that same URL from a different device on an unsanctioned network, just based on the fact that I'm logging in from a different device and posture assessments, I can restrict that access and apply different controls based on the application that I'm accessing. So it's pretty popular amongst our customers, especially those who are more security conscious. All right, it's time for our first demo, Scott.
All right, so let me switch over here to my Surface. And let me mention that I normally try to do all of my demos live. I'm one of these guys that loves doing live demos, as you guys probably all know. So I'm going to do some live. Some are going to be by video. It's not because they're not real. They're very real. It's just that I can only carry so many devices and set up so many things on this table in this time. So the first device I'm on is a Surface Pro. And I'm going to start with the access control service. And let's talk about Workspace as it sits today and as it ships today before we put the intelligent workspace stuff up on top. It's still an incredibly valuable tool to have to secure your enterprise. Who here has too many passwords? Who here wants more? I've never seen that. Well, boy, I don't know what you what's got you all excited for passwords, but but I've never. You're one of the first persons that's ever raised their hand and said they want more passwords. You know, just the other day, I'm catching myself, even with a more consumer app, having to always reset my password because I can't keep up with it all, right? And who here has wanted to go to something, but you have no idea on how to get to it? Okay, that happens, right? So what we want to do, again, even with Workspace in its current form, is bring everything together, your apps, both SaaS and, of course, traditional, as well as desktops and files. So the first thing I'm going to do is go over here and click on G Suite. And by the way, I've already authenticated to this, and it can be two-factor authentication using our time-based one-time passcode. Hands off the keyboard, all right? So at this point, we've invoked the embedded Workspace browser, and I'm now into G Suite, and you can see that watermark on there, which would tend to deter me from wanting to take screenshots, more on that in a moment, or a picture. I'm going to go into Gmail. And I'm going to call out that phishing is absolutely a real problem, right? In fact, the WannaCry and Petya attacks all came through phishing, that tempting thing to click on. And I actually gave myself a link here, and for what it's worth, the phishing emails we get are much more sophisticated than this. I just wanted to break it down and make it very simple for you. There's a couple of things before I get into that we can do with the Workspace. First of all, because we control this browser, we can lock some things down. In this particular one, you can see we left the print button on, but you don't see the address bar. The download button is broken, or not there actually, I shouldn't say broken. And if I were to go over here and just try to copy and paste, you can see there very clearly that we are blocking clipboard operations. Probably not a real good idea for someone in our enterprise to be going to the Pirate Bay. So that's where our access control service sees that as a blacklist. We are stopping that, either by specific site or by site type or keyword. But maybe we have a legitimate reason to go somewhere, but we aren't sure if we trust it. In this case, I've used ESPN.com as an example. And what's happening here is, in case this is a bad link, we're saying, hey, call that, and I like to call it this, the marketing folks probably don't like me calling it this, that great big XenApp server in the sky that magically gets thrown away when I'm done, okay? It's basically a hosted Linux OS, and if something goes wrong, if this was bad, we just throw it away.
So that's a key differentiator, right? So if you look at what most environments are doing as far as content filtering, it's an allow or deny typically, right? So you have a whitelist, you have a blacklist, you filter, you have some kind of transparent authentication. We have an additional option here, which is this launching an application in a secure browser that's running on a completely isolated network. So you're still giving users access to that URL, but it's running off of your network. So you are mitigating the risk associated with it. So that provides a little bit more options as far as what you can do with those apps.
So the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to switch over now, George, and we're going to move into Smart Access. And we had some folks that actually said that they are using this. So I'm going to tell you that Smart Access is cool and it's old school. I hope you guys think that about me. He's cool and he's old school. But I'm going to try to put a little bit of a different switch on it, or a little bit of a new school attitude with it. I'm going to show you some new things. Okay. Again, this is very real. This is being done off of video, but this is from my Azure environment, which is, of course, is fronted by Citrix Cloud App and Desktop Service, and a Citrix Gateway that I have sitting in Azure. So I'll go ahead and click to start the video. So let's say that I'm a person who's, getting ready to leave the company maybe. I'm thinking about it, I got a really good offer, so I want to maybe lift something. So I go home and I get on a Chromebook. First thing, I go open up the Chromebook and the URL here, not trusted. So you'll notice that I'm asked for a couple of things: who I am, my passcode, and a one-time time-based passcode delivered from the gateway service. We now include that. So I click on the enterprise desktop, and it's going to connect me up to the desktop. And right away, you're going to notice some things. And me as a user, if I don't log in a lot in this scenario, I notice some things right away. You'll notice the watermarking. That's fairly new school. Came along in VDA 717. Again, to deter me from wanting to take a picture of it. Okay? Some other things here. Let's say that I want to get to work and actually start pulling up that particular workflow that I want to do. First thing I want to do is launch an application critical to the enterprise. In this case, it's just an SAP app that I have in my demo environment. More on that in a moment on how we can watch what's going on. Next thing, I want to call up a very confidential file. It's back in the corporate network, so I use connectors through Citrix files. There's the customer confidential. Remember, I'm thinking about leaving the company. I'd like to take this customer list with me. So we'll start to look at it and do a few things with it. Get my windows all situated up here. What are the ways that I can take this information away? Well, I could copy and paste it, just do simple clipboarding. So you can see I brought up an org ID, and just to show you, yeah, of course it works within the session. Okay. Now then, let's say I were to copy all of those cells. For the interest of this demo, I just did one, so it's easy to follow. I go out to the local OS, and I open Google Docs, because nobody's tracking me there, right? And I can just start to bring that whole list out. So let's get a blank document open here, and I'll go on ahead and paste. That doesn't look like an org ID. The reason why is that's the text that's in the local buffer of the Chromebook. We have blocked clipboard from the host to the client. And that was dynamically controlled and turned on by Smart Access. Okay? So now let's say that I might want to actually copy something from the host or from the client into the host, and there's a legitimate business reason for that. I can do that. And by the way, HDX policies, this has been around for a little while. A lot of people don't know about it. I can lock down what type of information. Okay, next thing. If you're familiar with the Chrome client, you'll notice, or you'll know that there's always, when I have the ability to print, a Chrome print object that shows up here. It's blocked. And then what about saving as? Well, if you're familiar with using a Chromebook client, you'll know that we often don't map the client drives here. But up here on the context bar is an upload or a download function. Again, blocked. HDX policy invoked because I'm not sure I trust what this guy is doing. He obviously was not coming in from a trusted device. Now, our guy is determined to take this information away. And I hope that as IT administrators, we stop this or we track it. He goes and opens Yahoo Mail inside the virtual desktop and he copies it. You think we'll catch him doing that, George?
Let's see.
I have a pretty good suspicion we will. All right, so he didn't get much luck other than the email. So now he goes to work, or he accesses a work-owned computer, puts in the same URL. Watch closely. It detects something. Again, all those different things we can look for. In this case, it looked for a certificate. It even suggests a different authentication profile because we've got a new layer of trust. It just says, enter my password. Okay? So the certificate matches, and now I can enter the password for my username, launch the same desktop. By the way, we can search on all kinds of things: files, registry, keys, different watermarks within the registry keys, and versions and latest patches, you name it, right?
And just to give you some perspective, like back in 2007, I was doing this at a law firm. And so this has been around a long time. It's a very mature solution.
But I'll show you the new stuff that's with it. So, all right, so now he's inside of the virtual desktop, and he's roamed the session over, and he's trying to get this information. He's determined to get this information out, George. This guy is really a problem. His name's Scott Lane. He goes to print. Because we trust him, you'll notice that client print mapping, so he could print it off, but he's not sure that really works. So he does the thing that we wish all people didn't do. He goes to his local Office Max or Staples, and he buys one of these thumb drives. And he puts the thumb drive into the local client, and because we have this wonderful thing called USB mapping, it shows up in the session. Okay, so now he goes to save it. And he'll be successful at saving it, George, because he'll be able to walk away with that confidential information. Okay, we'll go ahead and let him save it here so that we can set up for the next section. So there he goes. He finds the removable disk. And this guy must be a Bruins fan because he's really giving me a hard time. I'm sorry. If you're from Boston, you're cool. All right. So you can see he saved it. All right, George, do you think we caught him?
I don't know.
Okay, here's the new school stuff. Big Brother was watching that whole thing. Session recording has been around almost as long as I've been at Citrix. But we've really put some new juice into the squeeze, if you will, recently. And I'm kind of excited about it. Version 19.3 just came out a couple months ago. Now supports the Citrix Cloud Delivery Controllers and Cloud Connectors. I could not have built this demo in my environment until this came out. That's the new piece of this.
So quick poll, who's used session recording here? Anyone? Interesting. All right.
Interesting. I get a lot of traction, and I'm talking about it more and more right now. And if you want to know more about it, we don't want to dig too deep in it, feel free to talk to George or I afterwards. But I can, this is another new thing that's come in. I can trigger the recording start or stop based upon things that I detect through Citrix Analytics. We'll show you that a little bit later. And then if I'm really, if I'm inclined to do so in coding, I could actually, with maybe a homegrown solution, trigger it to on-the-fly start via PowerShell. You'll also notice right over here, if you look over here to the side, log client drive mapping, log generic USB, log the app starts, and sensitive files and browser usage. Do you guys think I caught him? I caught him. Yeah, I'll show you. I caught him. I caught this guy. So this is session recording. I want to search for that S-lane guy. And you can see that I've got a session here that's blinking. That's because it's still going on. It's live. I can look at it. I can interact with it. He doesn't know I'm looking at it. It's a lot like TiVo. But I'm more interested in the third one down here. And you can see, look, down there in the lower left, there's already some bookmarks in there. We'll dig into this just a little bit. And you can see that it plays back exactly as it went, but I can bring it full screen, and I can search through to certain bookmarks. In fact, the first bookmark I'm going to search to is right there, and you can see that bookmark down at the bottom of the screen. That bookmark is where this user launched that SAP app. So if I'm wanting to always track what they're doing in a certain app, and they've been working for 8 hours, it's easy for me to scrub and find what I'm looking for. So there you go, launching the SAP app. Additionally, there are other bookmarks in there, as you can see, for example, over there at the side, going out and getting to the web, and we were able to determine that the user was trying to get out. Additionally, we're also seeing all of his file access in here, where he was actually trying to save it off. But again, he was on the Chromebook, smart access, had locked everything down, turned off all those policies. He didn't get anywhere. So if I'm the security analyst looking at this, I'm like, well, I can see he tried, but nothing really happened. So then I switch to the live Windows session. And then this is where I really come up with stuff, because I see a client drive mapping, and actually I can see that he stopped an app and so on and so forth. And I'm actually able to see and have visual evidence that he plugged in the USB thumb drive, because it'll show up down in the corner, and that he actually copied the file over. And by the way, I'm not an attorney, but these can be digitally signed, so that becomes admissible evidence to court.
So what's neat here is it's layered security, right? So we could have completely just disabled access to the USB drive if we wanted, using the same posture assessment. But in some scenarios, you trust the user, you provide them access, and even they could be stealing your corporate data. So that's where, in those scenarios, now you can actually detect when that's happening, you have actual evidence, and then you can even proactively now take actions with analytics.
All right, George, so the recording goes on, but in the interest of time, I'm going to move over to the next thing. Who here was excited about the armored client demo? What do we officially call it, Chris? I mess it up every time.
A boring name. App protection policies.
App protection policy.
Wow.
I will always call it armored client. When this guy first showed it to me, Chris, I went crazy, didn't I?
That's right.
I was like, man, I got to have, this is so cool, Chris. Yeah. And immediately I'm like, I got to have it so I can demo it everywhere. So I'm going to demo it to you right now and try to do it in a little bit deeper fashion than what they did.
Yeah, so while Scott sets this up, I think the key point with Armored Client is a lot of times when we show customers posture assessment and the policies that we have, they usually come up with a few different use cases that we can't address, and that's screen captures and key logging, right? So guess what? Now we address screen captures and key logging with the solution. So even for that 1% of use cases that we couldn't address before, now we have a solution, and more importantly, it's not a solution that's separate from the rest. It's all cohesive, and users can consume it fairly easily.
So where the rubber really meets the road on this, I don't know if the gentleman is in here from the financial services firm that I used to cover as an SE. I won't tell you what city they're in. You can probably guess. But I remember trying to say, why are you buying laptops for your financial advisors that are out in the field around all over the United States? It seems like such a waste. Why don't you deliver the whole thing through HDX? And he made a comment to me. He goes, Scott, if you took your entire portfolio and you let our firm handle it, and then your financial advisor decided to answer your question on a weekend, he went to his aunt's infected old Windows 7 with 0-day vulnerability PC and load up your portfolio. Would you feel comfortable? And I had to think about that a bit, because I'm thinking of all the things we can lock down in HDX, just like I just showed, but there was very little to stop the keyloggers and the screen scrapers, okay? So, for example, here, if you look here, I've got a keylogger running on my Windows laptop. And I'm sorry, it's kind of hard to see. It's the best I can do. But if I go here, and let's go ahead and launch Salesforce. Okay, SaaS app. Very, very important. From the moment we launch Workspace and the moment we go to log in, what is one of the most valuable pieces of information the bad guy could get? My password, absolutely. So I'm going to type it in here with the keylogger on. I will tell you that it's not Citrix 123, but it certainly isn't /v caret asterisk mr period /asterisk x.
Yeah, you're not that creative.
I'm not that creative. Okay, so at that point, now I'm up and running, and now I'll go into Salesforce. Now, what's also very important now, if I'm in Salesforce, what's also important to the bad guy? Oh gosh, to find out who I might be working with. I got a couple sales guys up in the front. Can you give me a customer name? This is not live data. Just throw me a name, household name. Cargill. They have some good chicken. Spelled with 2 L's, right? I typed in Cargill, and it came up caret U bracket 9F AM. Okay, I won't find Cargill in here. Guess what happens if I try to do snipping tool, let's say, and just get a screenshot of what I found on Cargill. If I go to snip, everything's grayed out. So we're protecting not just the password, the authentication, we're protecting the SaaS apps delivered through Workspace. And if I go ahead and launch HDX, it protects that too. And just by the way, because I'm a guy that likes to prove it's not smoke and mirrors, if I bring up something local, like the local notepad on this device and pull it over here to the side, in fact, you even see there that it saw that I typed in notepad, and now I'll do a typing test. It picked up every single thing, text by text, letter by letter, key by key, when I used something outside the Workspace. So you can see why I'm very excited about this. Everybody else as well? All right, George, I'll throw it back to you, my friend.
Yep, and just to, he talked about the local app issue here where we're not essentially providing the same functionality. That is definitely something we're thinking about.
Stick around. Dr. Fleck has a message for you.
All right, are we on 5?
Yep.
All right. So now let's talk about device security. We talked about contextual access, securing SaaS applications. Another major concern is you've got various types of devices. You've got users coming in with their own devices, then you've got your corporate assets, and it's not a one-size-fits-all solution, right? So if you look at how enterprises tackle this, they typically have one solution for their client management strategy, and they've got a different solution for their mobile device management strategy. And the challenge is that over time, just if you go through this process, using different tools adds complexity. The user experience is not great. I see this every day with my wife who uses some of the competing products, and she keeps asking me, like, wow, what does this mean? And I have no idea, right? So it becomes really, really hard. And then, it's also easy for the bad folks out there to essentially steal data when you've got all these different point solutions. So what we're seeing out in the industry is that these solutions are essentially converging into what's called unified endpoint management. And Citrix has a solution in this space as well, which we call Citrix Endpoint Management. So what does that really include? First off, we have mobile device management. So that is, if you think about your corporate-owned assets, you own those assets. You can apply whatever policies you want on those assets. And you can secure it to the point where you can restrict specific functions. If the device is stolen, you can essentially wipe the device. So it's pretty intrusive in terms of the policy that you're applying. But if it's your asset, why not? You own it. But as far as Citrix goes, we provide some bells and whistles above and beyond your basic MDM. And this is where we can do custom security policies based on triggers. So instead of just having a black and white list of what's allowed and denied, we look for specific conditions, and based on the condition, we can trigger a specific action. But more importantly, what about BYO, right? Most of us like to carry our own devices. I know Scott and I are both Android fans. We both like our Windows devices. We are the exception.
And Chromebooks.
And the Chromebooks, yes. So we like our devices, and we are probably the exception, but we like using those, right? So in that scenario, if Citrix wanted to enroll me, I would probably be upset because I'm concerned about someone accidentally wiping my device. It's not ideal. So for that scenario, we have what's called mobile application management. And the idea here is pretty simple. It's your device, but I'm going, as an enterprise customer, when I'm deploying enterprise applications, I'm going to carve out some space within your device, create an encrypted container, and I'm going to deploy these applications within that encrypted container, and I'm going to apply policies on a per application basis, right? So I might have a mail application. I might have some content that's delivered there as well. I might have some corporate apps. Now, all of these applications don't necessarily need to have the same policies. Like, for instance, authentication. Let's take that as an example. My authentication policy for mail is going to be different from, let's say, a more sensitive app, an ERP app, perhaps. Maybe for the ERP app, I want to force a user to log in every single time. But for mail, maybe from a user experience perspective, I want to have a longer timeout. You can set those policies because our policies are done on a per app basis. The other important piece is, we have 70+ MAM policies. You compare that to some of our competition, it's a fairly small number. So that's an important differentiator as well. The third piece is the micro VPN, and that's, again, a pretty cool policy, right? If you look at how competition deals with MAM, and this has evolved over time, but still, in most cases, you have a VPN tunnel that's being established at the device level, so basically all of your traffic is flowing in. What we can do is we can apply the VPN on a per app basis and apply whitelist and blacklist on a per app basis. So the timeouts and such can be set at that level as well. So this gives you more flexibility. So much so that some of our partners are using this capability when deploying their MAM solutions as well. So lastly, and this is one of my favorite pieces. I think what truly differentiates Citrix is our Citrix ADC, NetScaler. Some of us still like to call it NetScaler, but nonetheless, the Citrix ADC is what really gives us an advantage in the market, right? Because it's an end-to-end solution. We have so many great security features and functionality built into our ADC that we can leverage when using the rest of Workspace. So when you talk about mobility, we can apply multi-factor authentication, single sign-on, the micro VPN capability, SSL termination. So all of these are made possible because of the fact that our mobility stack is front-ended with our gateway and ADC. So again, key differentiator. Also from a support perspective, it's all supported end-to-end. So that brings us to the next demo. Scott, what do you have for us?
Hey, George, I got to show you this, man. I got to show you how we manage our unified endpoints. It's pretty cool stuff here, man. It's all
Yeah, it's
done from
cool.
the cloud.
Don't you
and
think these
it's
guys want to
crazy.
see it too?
You and I, when we work together, we get so wrapped up, we forget we have people around us. You're right. But I already got it here on my phone. There's got to be a better way. Yeah, well, George, this is one of my favorite things to do, right? If it ever comes up. Did it go to sleep?
Probably did.
Ah, there we go. All right, one of my favorite things to do. And by the way, remember when we told everybody to move to the front? Hint, hint. Anyway, so, George, these folks need to see this big screen here. So I happen to walk into the conference room, and if I can get out here and get it,
All right,
cast
Scott.
that whole session up there.
I'm sold, for sure. I think I'm so sold that I'm going to give one away today. So why don't you guys just look under your seats. One of you will find something that looks like find anything? This.
Looks like that.
Look harder.
I'll give you a hint.
I see someone sitting right next to it.
I am standing pretty close to the area in the room where it is.
All right. I think we have a winner.
There it is. Come on up.
Come on.
All right. So who do we have here?
So we have with us Jan Anderson.
From
All right.
Deloitte? All right. So absolutely. Chris, you don't need to use
Probably
this,
need
right?
to.
You're good? All right. So you know what?
Just going to take a picture of your pad.
Jan gets, you get a pie. No, actually these are RX HDX by In Computing, and of course there are more down there. Feel free to use that. So George, should I be concerned that I just gave Jan that pie?
Yeah, I was going to ask, aren't you worried about the security? I mean, you just unplugged it and gave it to him.
No, I'm not, George. Actually, not at all, because here, I'll go ahead and show you here. Jan, you see right there where it says Workspace Hub? Yeah, Citrix Endpoint Management does more than smartphones and tablets now. So I can push configurations to that. And oh, by the way, when you go plug that thing in, I didn't actually get it done. But had I gotten it enrolled into my environment, I could wipe it as soon as you plug it in. So, but it's ready for you to use and for you to enjoy, and thank you for coming to our session.
Have fun.
Hey, give it up for Jan. But George, there's actually a better story to security around this. Hey, you know what? I love pie. Do you know why I like pie so much?
Please enlighten me.
What's my birthday? I'm a pie baby, March 14th.
Oh, there you go.
Anyway.
All I know is that he's wiped Micro Center off of pies. There's no more left there.
But anyway, there's a security story behind that. I mentioned that I used to work for a customer before I came to work for Citrix, and that was a financial services customer. We've all gone into the bank, we've walked up to a teller line, and think back a little bit, right? Now we open them online. But we go up to the teller line, we're like, I want to open a certificate of deposit. I want to open a checking account. Now, do they make you stand right there to do that? No. They would say, well, Mr. Lane, I'm so glad you're going to be a customer at XYZ Bank and Trust. Let me come around, let's go out to the personal banker desk where I can take your information. For us, the personal banker desk was literally the first desk when you walked through the door, and it had a full, back then, Windows XP PC sitting on it that anybody could log into and open a new account. Now, back then I worked for the bank, and I had to work on a number of those devices, and I would always find spreadsheets with customer information on them. We never had it happen, but can you imagine one of those walking out the door with a whole bunch of customer contact information on it? By us giving that to Jan or Jan? Jan, okay, sorry. He got absolutely nothing. So that's the security angle. If we keep the data off the endpoint, and we can do it at a low cost, there's a lot of benefits to that.
And I think there have been a couple of customer cases where that exact scenario has happened, where people have walked away with devices and they've lost intellectual property. So this can address it. And I think another important differentiator, when you talk about our MDM capabilities, we just showed you how we can extend beyond your typical devices, Windows, Mac, and whatnot, to our endpoint, our pies here. So you can essentially get a whole stack of these, deploy it to your end users. They plug it in. It's fully configured and ready to go. And you can wipe them. And if something is wrong with it, you just plug another one, and you're good to go.
Yeah, Frank Serp was doing a presentation. His was before ours, or I would recommend you go to it. He was actually showing how he was pushing all the configurations to them, so they're very easy to manage, very, take it off the shelf, right?
Yep.
Now, another one of my favorite devices is my Chromebook. And you'll notice the mapping here. This is from my Chromebook, and I actually have my Chromebook managed, so I went in and I could actually track where my Chromebook was. So there's a lot I can do with my Chromebook to control the endpoint. I'm going to switch to the Chromebook right now. This Chromebook is enrolled in Citrix Endpoint Management. And I'll stop here and point out, as I put in the password, that one of the things I can do is actually lock down the browse as guest. Well, don't ask how, but somehow or another, I managed to get myself locked out by doing that, so I turned it off for myself. But there's a couple of things to point out that happen here. You'll notice right away, it pops up and says, hey, enter a PIN. Okay, so that basically unlocks my ability to browse with this Chromebook. And now this Chromebook being fully enrolled, we have some control over, no matter where in the world it is, because we have right there in the app, the Citrix Secure Hub. Now, of course, I also have my Workspace on it, so I can do all kinds of things, right? Everything that comes to me inside a Workspace, pretty much can do here on the Chromebook. I assume, yeah, there we go. I was going to say, I assume I'm connected to the network.
Also important to mention that we just announced extending secure mail to the Chromebook. So when you talk about offline access to mail, now you can do it on the Chromebooks as well. So.
And that's one of those things I need right away, Dr. Fleck, because I'm a big Chromebook guy.
I gotcha.
Now, you guys know I like to kind of pick on thumb drives, right? Got my good old trusty thumb drive here. Guess what? Yep, can't do it. That's yet another policy we can control on Chromebook. By the way, we can control that on Windows, Macs, other things too. And, I don't want anybody to see what I'm doing, so I'm going to go incognito mode. No, I'm not. That's yet another thing that I can block on my Chromebook. And you know what, George? Oh, well, what the heck? I'm just going to go ahead and type in that URL anyway. thepiratebay.org. Not going to do it. Blocked.
So that brings up an interesting point. So we talked earlier about access control and the SaaS and web applications and putting content filtering around that. We will be extending that capability to the native browser as well. So in the future, in the near future actually, so if you wanted to control the local browser on the user's endpoint and do filtering, you'll be able to do that as well.
So now I'm going to transition back to the smartphone. And before I actually go to the slide, how many people here are parents? We're all parents, right? A lot of us are. Who has little kids? Anybody with little kids? Okay, yeah. I have grandkids, so I guess I qualify. You have the iPad, the tablet that you love to use, maybe even your phone. And so you put a very simple pin or no pin on it whatsoever, because when Junior wants to watch Peppa Pig, you hand him the iPad, right? But meanwhile, right there is your corporate mail and those applications delivered to you by corporate America. And how does corporate America control that? Because, like George said, I don't want them making me enroll that device. George was even telling me that his daughter sent off some interesting emails.
Yes.
So George, let me show you what you need, man. All right. So again, this is an Android phone, still works with Apple. But what I have here, oh, that's right, on this one I have to click the start. I'm sorry. Let me get that going. Is it going? Yeah, okay. So what I have here is a phone that has no passcode off the front, but I can enforce and make that passcode mandatory. And that was actually a 3-digit passcode, or a 6-digit passcode. But now when I launched Secure Mail, did you notice it asked for a second passcode that was 4-digit? So now, even though this device is not enrolled, I can say to have corporate information on it, you've got to have a passcode, even if you don't enroll it. And oh, by the way, when you launch the corporate information, you got to have a second passcode, something different, so that when your kid watches Peppa Pig, that same passcode won't get you into mail.
Yep. So this goes back to the old conversation around MAM policies that you can apply on a per app basis. That's a great example.
So I don't know if you caught this yet or not. Let me back up here just a little bit. So there was a link in there. How many times you got an email, it goes nowhere, right? Because that's on the internal network. You can see this one opened. That's our micro VPN technology. No need to have a VPN client on this phone. Some companies I've talked to do that. We do app specific. Now there's an attachment. I open it in the previewer. Where am I going to save it off to? Remember, this phone's not fully managed. I can restrict the open in. In this case, I can only open in Citrix files. And in this case, I'm going to save it to Citrix files. And then, let me see here. Oh yeah, I know what the next thing is. If I go back to the mail, and I can't save it anywhere, and I'm kind of, I got VPN, I can get into the network, but only certain things. Can I just copy and paste that information out to something local? Well, by the way, guys, for this recording, I hit paste like 3 times, just like I did in the HDX demo. You can't do that. So now that I want to send this email off, George and I have been working on that letter, and I'm going to send it to a guy who we work with a lot by the name of Adam Mandelblum. And I'm not sure I totally trust Mr. Mandelblum.
I don't blame you.
He gets this all the time. I wish he was here. But you'll notice if I go to the open it in Workspace and I go to the edit mode, I got a lot of things I can do. Like I can share by Citrix files email. Pay attention to this. I use this feature on an insurance claim, and it helped me get a very good insurance claim. So I'm going to send it off to Mr. Mandelblum, and it's for his review. See, I love the swipe right.
Android for the win.
But it's not rescue, it's review. Pay real close attention. Now, I can require the recipient to log in. I've got it checked to notify me every time they're accessed, and look at these options. View online only, view online with watermark, or let them have full control. The story that I'll tell you is an insurance claim of a flooded basement. By the way, I'm going home to another one right now in Missouri. But essentially, I sent a whole bunch of receipts to my insurance adjuster, got no notification they were ever opened. I went to my agent. She said, how do you know that he didn't open them? So I sent them to her. She opened her email. She goes, oh, here are all the receipts. And I handed her my phone and go, and I got notified that you opened them. I never got that when I sent them to the adjuster. I got a good settlement. I really did. Caught him. Anyway, I'm not picking on anybody who might be in the insurance industry. So what about, I've shown Workspace here, getting access to the files. One of the things today in Workspace on a device like a tablet, even more so on a smartphone, is if I went back there and I launched Salesforce, it doesn't open it in the native Salesforce or Workday. And this is where you get to show you something a little bit future looking, right? It actually uses the local browser. And to be right honest with you, while it does SSOUN and give you the contextual controls and puts the watermark on there and all that beautiful stuff, I don't know about you, George. I don't like using that experience. Not when there's a native app. So this that I'm about to show you is a mock-up, okay? This is not real. Let me get to it here. Not real. It is a mock-up, but it is due to come, and I did get approval, Chris, by the product teams to show this. So essentially, let me go on ahead and start the demo video for you. Oops. Oh man, I can't get that started on this Mac.
By the way, if you haven't figured it out yet, Chris gets to play with all the cool toys. I wish I had his job, like make all the cool products.
I have contact lens day that won't make me see that. Let me see that little start arrow down there.
Or start arrow. I don't see it either. Oh, there you go. Playing now?
There it is. OK. Thank you, George. So I open Workspace, the URL, click on it, and oh, George, check out my super secret, secure password.
Nice job.
Yeah, this is not real. So I go on ahead and log in, and then I'm into the Workspace on my Android or my iPhone. Just like normal, right? I can go look and find all my apps, my desktops, my files, and I'm looking for something. I'm looking for Workday, so I'll use universal search. So I'll type in keyword work and search, And of course, we find at that point different things, right? Files as well as apps. And there's Workday. Now watch. When I click on Workday, it opens the native app, SSOs me in. Okay, so I don't have to remember that password to get into Workday to use the native app on the phone. Again, Workspace was that authentication, that strong authentication of Workspace was the key that unlocked the door for everything. And this is coming soon. All right, George, there you go.
All right, I got mine.
Oh, okay.
So I think Scott showed some of the capabilities on the secure content collaboration piece already. So we talked about apps, we talked about devices. What's the next big thing? It's content, right? So normally users use their desktops to get to apps and data. So let's talk about data and how we secure it. So most environments, if you look at data, the challenge is that a lot of the data still lives on premises, and maybe some data will forever live on premises. Some will move to the cloud. So if you look at most enterprise file sync and share solutions out there, they store most of the data in the cloud. Very few offer the flexibility to keep that stuff on premises. What's nice with our content collaboration solution is that we allow we give our end users the flexibility to access data from anywhere, but we abstract the complexity, right? So as far as the user is concerned, they see their folders. They don't really understand where it's coming from, but we can secure that the data and also apply policies that you deem necessary on that data. If you're storing the data in cloud, we still give you the ability to own the encryption keys as well. So it's the best of breed, right, in the sense that you have the flexibility to keep the data where it needs to be, both on premises and in the cloud. The other big piece is we talked earlier about the fact that the gateway, the Citrix ADC front ends all of our solutions. So because of that, we have inherent security benefits. In this case, single sign-on with multi-factor authentication is a big piece of that. We also proxy all the connections coming into our enterprise file sync and share solution, content collaboration through the gateway service. You have a data source choice. So in other words, if you wanted to aggregate data from various repositories, so there's a very nice possibility that the user is already using additional solutions. I think I was in Dan Feller's session yesterday where he talked about how cheap he is and he uses every free source that he can use, and he will continue to do so. But for him to be productive, he needs access to that data too. And guess what? We can aggregate all of that data in addition to our solution and in many cases, OneDrive for Business as well. So that's available. And lastly, we have workflows and collaboration built into the solution as well. And then another key differentiator is the reporting and analytics, right? So we've had pretty rich reporting right from the get-go with ShareFile. So if you wanted to know who's accessing different links, so the links that Scott showed earlier that's being shared out, if you wanted to track who's accessing it or you wanted to put policies around how many times that link can be accessed, we can do that. But more importantly, you can run reports that show you where those links have been accessed from, the IP address, what they're doing with it. So it's pretty rich in there by itself. But now we've gone even further with the analytics integration, right? So now we can essentially drive risk indicators based on user behavior. So how much data is actually being downloaded? If it crosses a certain threshold, perhaps we trigger an action. We can do that kind of thing, right? So we can trigger session recording or expire links. So it's pretty rich in terms of what we can do. In addition to that, another common thing that comes up is most environments have, most enterprise customers anyway, have some sort of information rights solution, management solution deployed already, where they classify the data, and they want to essentially use the existing classifications but tie into our content collaboration solution. And we essentially allow that by leveraging the ICAP protocol, which most leading IRM solutions support. So that's another integration point that our customers like to take advantage of. And lastly, I think Scott showed this earlier with his demo, right? So when you talk about when you share a file out, perhaps you want to watermark that file and make it view only. So think of it as lightweight IRM, right? So that capability is available as well.
And the beauty of it is, if I sent that file to Adam and I didn't want him to have it again,
yep,
I can self-expire that link.
Yep. So we showed you DLP, we showed you IRM, we showed you the native flexibility of storing your data on premises or in the cloud. For data that's more restrictive, more secure, you can keep that on premises as well. And for the data that's living in the cloud, you can own the encryption keys. So no demo here in the interest of time, so we'll move on to governance, risk, and compliance. Again, I feel like every customer is worried about this. GDPR comes up almost on a daily basis. So it's a use case that we can help you address. So at a high level in terms of GDPR, the things that most customers are worried about is employees that actually work out of the EU, and then customers that are in the EU, and you want to keep that, you want to have data sovereignty in this case. And with content collaboration and virtual apps and desktops, you can actually address that use case. But in addition to that, there are various other compliance regulations that need to be addressed, and our suite of solutions can essentially help you address those use cases. We've been doing it for a very long time with virtual apps and desktops. I would say that a majority of the use cases for virtual apps and desktops is security related, and one big piece of that is compliance. All right, so let's move on to security analytics. How many of you have already heard about security analytics and heard too much about it? So I'm going to skim through if you already heard a lot. All right. So high level, why does this matter? I'm going to try to take an angle of what customers do there to kind of help and differentiate what we do, right? So most customers, when you look at the SIEM solutions, the challenge is that you've got all kinds of disparate systems. You've got all kinds of data flowing in. You've got to find some sort of an aggregation point. So you find the solution that essentially collecting all of this data, syslog data. You have a lot of data. And now you've got to normalize this data, make this data actually convey a message, and then find out what actions need to be applied. And this is not easy, right? If you look at customers that have deployed SIEM solutions and the learning curve there, it's quite steep. Now, once you get to a point where you've learned the solution, it's operationally, it gets better. But the point is to get to the point where you can actually gather some relevant information. It takes time. And our solution is fundamentally different. Now, a big caveat to that is for our solution to provide value, our end users need to start consuming Workspace. And hopefully, we've done a good job selling you on the security benefits of the Workspace. So once they start consuming Workspace, as they start consuming different services, whether that's a SaaS application, or they're using device security, or content collaboration, or a virtual app, all of these provide data points into our analytics solution that we can then use to provide you what some of the common risks are in your environment and what actions can be delivered. But the point is that it's a turnkey solution. You don't really need to do much. Once you start consuming Workspace and you just turn it on, we're collecting data at that point. The second thing is because it's a closed-loop autonomous system, we are looking at the user from various vantage points, and the accuracy tends to be higher. And lastly, it is, it's autonomous, so we provide you a list of actions that you can essentially enable by a checkbox. So it's, even though the risk indicator might be virtual apps and desktops related, you could apply an action that's from a completely different product. Probably it's a content collaboration function. So we give you that kind of flexibility because it's all part of the Workspace. So again, just to kind of run through the benefits, like it helps you identify what happened, how it happened, and looking at trends, you can kind of predict what will happen and then give you actions in terms of what to do. And we've also recently mentioned that we have extended capabilities where you can integrate our solution with Splunk, and very soon we'll also be able to integrate this with Azure as well. The solution is not restricted to customers that leverage the public cloud alone. If you're on premises, you can still leverage this, or even if you're a hybrid cloud customer, this can be leveraged. All right, let's do a demo.
All righty. Well, George, let's switch over here to my trusty Chromebook. And now we're in the Citrix Cloud console, and I've landed on analytics. The first thing I'm going to do is actually, this is my live environment, and I don't really have anything set up. That's on purpose. I want to show you. Remember, we kicked this whole thing off with session recording, and I mentioned that you can dynamically kick in session recording of things going on based upon what the user's doing. So I'm going to go here to settings, just show you how easy it is to do a few things. First of all, to get to the point where you're collecting data, it's pretty doggone easy. You just go in here. These are all the Citrix data sources. You just turn them on. And then, oh, by the way, you can add in here things like Microsoft Security Graph. I've already got them on, so they're in my environment. The next thing, though, is you can set up, if you do nothing, you'll still collect data from the data sources, and you'll be able to see the risk scores go up. But now I'm going to set some policies. And let's say that I really wanted to do something based upon the session recording. So if a certain action is met, and I can look at several different things here, and let me go to virtual apps and desktops, and I will choose potential data exfiltration. Guess what? That's what our rogue user was doing at the beginning of this session. All those recordings that we captured. Do the following. Well, I can do several things based upon that one thing there, but I'm going to start session recording. And basically, I give the policy a name, and at that point, it just happens. So you don't have to have that recording on all the time. I just happen to do that for the sake of that demo to show you its capabilities. Now I'm going to switch over to another environment that is actually a demo environment, and it has some static, I don't want to say static, but some demonstration data in it. It's just to kind of show you what we could do. So I've landed on the dashboard, and I'm going to change the view out to the last day. Look over the last day. And I've got some high-risk users coming in here. First I see Georgina, and I see Caroline and Kevin. I'm going to look first at Caroline. Looks like she's starting to trend up there. She's not yet high, but she's trending up there. So if I look down here, and I'm choosing Caroline because we just talked about content collaboration. And Caroline here obviously has an issue. We don't know why, whether Caroline has had her credentials lifted or whether Caroline is up to no good. But we are starting to see some things here like unusual upload volume. She was using some different devices. If I look at this, I can click it out even further and see where even sometimes where these are. Yeah, there you are. Actually, she was using a Windows NT device there. When we talked about the smart access, that's EPA scan failures. Here's some unusual SaaS usage, stuff that she doesn't normally use. Okay, we even get the IP address of where that's at. But then we start to see, once we see some of this going on, we're going to notify the administrators, start session recording if something happens inside of the virtual desktop. But look what's going on here. DLP alerts, potential data exfiltration, large downloads, and excessive file sharing. This is where autonomously, automatically, we can take proactive action to stop the breach. And this is a big one on content collaboration. See what happened here? Expired all the links. By this time, we know that something's wrong. Caroline knows something's wrong. And every link that she's generated is expired in case somebody's been going in there and getting it on her behalf and sending those out on her behalf. So that's an example with Caroline. I'm going to jump out now and go over here to Georgina Kalu. All right. Georgina is an interesting person because Georgina actually, travels around a lot, it may appear. So again, she starts her day off logging in from a variety of unmanaged devices and jailbroken or rooted devices. Now, first of all, most people aren't like George and I. We have one device that you use, right? You and I use many, but most people have one device that you use. And so that's something there.
Getting a little concerned there, one device.
Say what?
I thought you said we use one device.
No, I said we have many that we use, so, but most users only have one device, okay? She also has excessive file downloads as well. We started the session recording. We can see DLP alerts and authorization failures. And if we look here at we can dig in and get even more information about what types of things that she was trying to access through the ADC. Unusual login access, and look at this, it's coming from Greece. Now, in the interest of time, I will tell you that I've dug into some of these many, deeper and deeper, and you will see in some cases the user, let's see if this one actually shows it. No, it doesn't, but in some cases the user will be in Greece, in 15 minutes later they'll be in Australia. And that's clearly a breached password. So what do? We can set the actions that the system takes depending upon what type of business we are. Financial trading organization will tell me that if something like this happens for real, I want all sessions killed, all links expired. I want to notify admins, I want to lock the accounts, and I want to notify her. Now, at an executive briefing, the next customer came in, we had this discussion, and they said, we're healthcare. What if Georgina is a critical care nurse in the critical ICU? In that case, I want to notify Georgina, put her on that watch list, make sure IT knows something's going on. But whatever you do, start session recording too, by the way, while she's in the Epic system. But whatever you do not terminate her access, because she may be at the patient bedside taking orders from a doctor that is giving life-saving care at that very moment. So it's all up to you. Here's the thing about analytics. If we never create a policy, we can learn a lot just by watching the risk scores rise. And it's just that easy to set up.
And that's generally the recommendation, right? The first thing you want to do is enable it, kind of try to understand what the normal behavior patterns are before you go ahead and enable actions.
All right, George, I think I am wrapped up with that.
All right, so I just want to give Anna a minute to promote her session. I know she's got a deep dive on analytics. So what's the session number? Next room, 415. All right, there you go, if you want to learn more about analytics.
Anna's spending a whole session on analytics, unlike 3 minutes like I did, right, Anna?
Yep, and another important thing to talk about analytics. So in the past, one of the complaints we would hear from users is, hey, I'm completely on premises. I have virtual apps and desktops on premises. I can't really take advantage of analytics because I'm not going to start using Workspace just yet. So you could technically use Workspace and tie it to your on-premises workloads, but that was not that was not an acceptable solution for them. So we've heard that loud and clear, and we are going to be extending capabilities where you can use the existing storefront and tie that back into our analytics service to take advantage of the same capability. So that's coming soon.
But the important thing there too is that you're using, not staying back on a version of Receiver. You've got to be on Workspace app.
Correct, that's exactly right. So now, this is probably why most of you came here. So we've got...
You didn't come here to see us. You came here to see some guy in a bright shirt.
We've got a guest speaker here. Chris Fleck, who's our VP and Citrix Technology Fellow, who's going to show us a glimpse into the future. So we are pretty excited about this as well.
All right, Chris, let me get you on there you are. Face is down, but we got the face live in person. There you go.
Okay. So wanted to show is a couple of demos and some videos as well, but wanted to follow up to what was presented earlier here, talking about security and Workspace, and some of the things that were announced here this week. So one of the things that was announced that didn't necessarily get a lot of detail underneath it was the hybrid configuration for access control. So what Scott demoed earlier is a great new value add for SaaS and web applications that you can add security, add compliance, add watermarks, etc. Although up until now, what that's required is you to move your storefront.
Oh, there you go, Chris. Sorry.
There we go.
I didn't realize you needed to do this slide.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll do that before the demo. So basically, what we're showing here is kind of the before, right? Which is you've got a perimeter, you've got storefront on-prem, you've got XenApp on-prem, and for your remote users or for an internal user, they would go to storefront and then connect to their XenApp or XenDesktop and have a direct connection. And we recognize that that's a common configuration that people don't want to change necessarily because it gets the best performance and provides a direct connection. Similarly, if you've got external users, they'll go through a gateway and then connect in to a XenApp session that's running inside. What we're showing that's different now, and the way to enable access control for SaaS and web is to be able to, now that user would effectively route outside only for the SaaS traffic. So in other words, if you want to enable Workday, Salesforce, any of the new additional SaaS applications that you might be delivering to your employees, or maybe they're getting through their lines of businesses where you lose control, what you're able to do now is provide the access control service, but don't touch your storefront. And the way that that's happening is we've basically created a new utility that allows you to sync the access control the security policies, the URL, the icon, all of that actually gets pulled out of access control and then inserted into your storefront, into the DDC. And so that way your XenApp mission critical applications are untouched, your storefront's untouched, but you can add the security and the access control benefit that goes up to the cloud only. So let me go through it. Okay, here's the here's a view of the actual admin control, where you would pick the apps that you want to deliver, the SaaS apps, the web applications, the sync utility that talks through an API to the cloud service, and then gives you that same ability to launch a SaaS or web application without having to impact your on-prem infrastructure. You want to switch me over?
Absolutely, Chris.
So, so what you see here is, again, this is looks like an existing storefront, right? Because it is. But what's new is these icons, the Salesforce. And again, what we're showing here is this is not Salesforce running on a hosted browser on XenApp and then launching. It's actually launching natively inside the embedded browser in Workspace app. So again, Workspace app is much more than a name change from receiver. We've got an embedded browser with security policies that does things like the watermark, like the download control, the restrictions, the analytics, and your effect without all the overhead. So this didn't take any added servers, it didn't take any added storage, didn't take any added infrastructure or Microsoft licenses or anything else. We're able to launch and protect Salesforce and any other SaaS application like that, and do it without the traditional overhead or without the risk that a lot of companies are taking when they allow their lines of businesses to deploy SaaS applications to employees through a standard browser. You might be able to control the authentication up front, but then you have no control after that. And so this is a dramatic improvement in terms of the security posture for any SaaS application.
So Chris, that's an important differentiation, right? So we have a lot of customers that are using virtual apps and desktops today to deploy browser-based apps. And the primary reason for that is either performance or security. So what he essentially showed you is now you have another option. You can use this hybrid SaaS model to use the embedded browser to apply the same HDX-like policies for your app, for your web applications, and no longer have that added infrastructure required to do it the old-fashioned way. So something to think about.
And the other thing to consider is, oftentimes we see this in healthcare, right, Chris, where you have the workstations that are pointing to a local storefront because they're running a local instance of Epic or Cerner or one of those EHRs.
Yep.
And they aren't quite ready to make all that move to the cloud yet. And so therefore they still want to do the SaaS app stuff. They can now get to it this way.
Yep. So how many here have a storefront on-prem? A lot of hands went up there.
There you go.
So this is for you. This is a way to add security to SaaS applications that maybe you're not doing today, or as George said, you might be publishing browsers on XenApp, which comes with an overhead and a cost. Some of the things we've heard about recently is companies that have been doing that, but they've got servers that have got Windows Server 2008 or whatever, they're expiring, and now they have to do something about it. This is a way to actually improve security with some of the same type of HDX features, but without the overhead of doing that.
Yep, and there's still a play for the old method. Like the virtual app method is still needed. If you have a legacy application that has certain Java plugins or whatnot, you're probably still going to use the virtual app methodology. Or if performance is a huge concern, maybe that's still an approach. But the point is, for a majority of use cases, you don't need to do that. You have this additional option.
And they can be side by side here as well. So as you mentioned, there are use cases there. The embedded browser is based on Chromium, So if your app works in Chromium, it'll probably work here. But if it does have special requirements, putting it on a hosted browser is still the right thing to do.
Chris, if I remember correctly, you told me that Chromium, of all the tests that we've done with browsers, is probably the most broadly compatible one.
Exactly, right. And matter of fact, as some of you may know, actually even Microsoft has kind of thrown in the towel with Edge, and they're basing that on Chromium now as well. What you see down here is also a new feature, which is basically internal web apps. So I'm pointing to an intranet site that's behind our firewall in Miami data center, but you see how fast it launched and it works well. And yet it still has the security benefits on it. And again, we're adding security to native web applications without the overhead, with great performance, great usability.
So it's basically a micro VPN back to that site.
That's exactly what it is. Micro
like
VPN
we did with the phone.
Inside the embedded browser with the security controls. So let me move on to some additional, let's see, what's this one? Okay, so this one got some applause, yes, or Tuesday when we announced it. And what we've got here is, so how many of you have users, employees that have native applications, desktop apps, Windows apps?
Every one of us.
A bunch of hands, right? As much as we love virtual, there's still lots of use cases and lots of users, millions and millions that use desktop apps. What you're seeing here and what we just announced is, and this is a recording, but it's showing launching from Workspace. In this case, OneNote was actually installed already. You just click and it launches, but it's inside the Workspace environment. And then the next app there, what we're showing is it was not installed at this point. We're using the Citrix endpoint management server and an MDM to push down the application. So it's being pushed down, and now just click and launch and run it locally. So that's a big advantage, I think, for companies that want to, again, put all their applications in one place, whether it's virtual, whether it's local, whether it's web, whether it's SaaS, whether, any, we keep saying any, but we had a couple of big exceptions before.
Yeah,
so I think
Chris,
so he just eliminated that big exception.
there's one thing that comes to mind with this, right? And I've had this discussion with some folks inside the product groups. We want the workspace to be that one place where you go to work.
That's right.
Okay, everything all-inclusive there. I just put Workspace on, I securely authenticate to it, and my world just unlocks for me. And I don't worry about any passwords beyond that point. I don't worry about how to connect. But if I'm toggling out of the Workspace to get back to a local app, it's kind of a disjointed experience. So, yeah, I'm really excited about this because I think this is something that's been missing in Workspace. Now, when we layer on all the intelligent Workspace on top of that,
right,
nirvana.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. You can get all your work done one place. Now, this is coming out next quarter, and you'll be able to use endpoint management to integrate and deliver native applications like this. But you can think beyond what we're not announcing yet, but you can probably speculate, like, okay, so now we have this armored technology for keystroke loggers. We've got this screen capture technology. We've got great analytics for user security. We've got great analytics for performance. So you can imagine, obviously, we're going to be able to apply these technologies to local apps in addition to HDX apps, in addition to SaaS apps, in addition to mobile apps.
So protection and tracking even when the user is using something local.
Yep.
So I think the key point here is that it's not just aggregation, it's the entire life cycle, right? So it's deploying the application, aggregating the application, and then reporting on the application. So it's all of the above. And as customers go down this transition to Workspace, it's not going to happen overnight. For a long time, they're still going to have those native applications that will eventually transition. So this gives us a way to essentially aggregate those applications and also give customers a strategy in terms of how they go about moving certain local apps into that virtual world or SaaS world or whatever it might be in the future.
Hey, Chris, I'm excited about this one.
Okay, yeah. So
I really like this one.
I know that at least how many healthcare folks here in the room?
There's got to be some healthcare here.
A bunch of hands, right? So So yeah, someone told me recently that on this topic of tap and go, it's like either they have it or they want it, and if they have it, they paid too much. But anyway, what we're showing here, and this is not available yet, but again, I'm the guy that shows the new stuff. That I'm always looking for feedback as to, what should we do next and what's the priority. And so what we're showing here is extending the functionality of our endpoint management, which already, it's a robust, proven system that has users and AD synchronization and tokenization, and we've got this ability to enroll devices. Well, what if you could enroll your badge? And so that's what we're able to do now, is actually enroll badges into our endpoint management system. And so what you see here is an enrollment process where the admin would initially, when a single time use, tap a badge and give it associate with a username. And then once that username is established, the first time a user would actually click to or tap their badge, they would need to enter it. So you see the badge just got enrolled in our device management system. The first time the user uses it, they would have to enter their password, but that's a one-time use only. So they then log in, and from there, a user would basically just tap into their session, and that's going to launch a session, or it could launch an app within a session. And we're able to effectively use tap to enter. We can also, again, because we've got endpoint management and enrolled mobile devices, we can use the Bluetooth connectivity to do a disconnect based on proximity. So even if the physician forgets to tap out, when they walk away and they're out of the room, it'll disconnect automatically. And that's one of the things that we are addressing, as well as the complaints we hear is the window, the timeout window is typically very short because you guys, right, the IT doesn't trust the physician to tap out, and you don't want the EMR screen left up there for 10 minutes or however long. But if you know that when that physician leaves the room, that session's going to disconnect anyway, then you can give them a longer session without having to shorten it. So
I'm dying to ask this question, Chris. I mean, obviously, healthcare is a place where I see this a lot.
Right.
But I mean, recently I had an inquiry from a large manufacturer. I've had an inquiry from a retailer, very, very large retailer that has big warehouses.
Yep.
Interested in tap and go solutions. Do we see it going beyond healthcare?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And matter of fact, that's where we've seen, like, obviously we know there's one primary vendor out there, but they're only dealing with healthcare. But there's lots of other industries that could use this. So yeah, we're interested in feedback on this. I'm interested in feedback on this. What actually happened under the covers here as well is single sign-on to legacy apps.
I was wondering about that. We should have brought that up.
So a lot of what we've been showing earlier with the SaaS apps is we're assuming that it's a SAML-enabled new modern SaaS app, and for that, our access control works great. But as you know, there's still a lot of enterprise applications out there that have credentials, usernames, IDs, passwords that are different than AD. And we've got a solution for that now as well. And so
our guy who said he wanted more passwords apparently left. I think we were solving his problems
right.
too much. So,
so again, the password management is something that I'm interested in feedback. We're not announcing it here, but we do have it working. We've got it demoed, both these things, all of these things at the Innovation Hub. If you want to come by and get a more in-depth demo.
Awesome. Chris, before you leave, one last question, which I bet everyone's thinking here. Where do we find those shirts?
Those are trademarked. Do you have your own label
shirts.
on there, Chris?
I make it easy to find me. That's right. And to answer your question, the clearance rack often, because nobody else will wear this.
All right, thank you, Chris. Appreciate it.
Sure.
George, are you ready for this? I mean, VP and technical fellow, and he shops off the clearance rack? Chris?
There's something wrong with that.
Thanks, Chris.
Sure.
All right, so that's almost a wrap. So just to summarize, hopefully through this session, we were able to show you that Workspace is beyond just user experience and productivity. There are various security benefits, and I'd argue that if you look at most customers that leverage Citrix today, it's primarily that security use case. And we were hopefully we showed you all the different aspects that we can address with the Workspace. So,
Even some old school stuff.
yeah, there you go. I thought I heard password manager in there somewhere.
I kind of thought I felt it.
All right, so if you guys can take some time to rate the session, we'd greatly appreciate it. But thank you very much for your time. And if you've got questions, we'll be around. Thank you.